Hello, good morning, friends. In today's session, we are going to have summary and analysis of chapter 6 and chapter 7 of Animal Farm by George Orwell. Now I'll deal with the summary of chapter 6. For the rest of the year, the animals work at backbreaking pace to farm enough food for themselves and to build the windmill. The leadership cuts the rations. Squirrel explains that they have simply readjusted them and the animals receive no food at all unless they work on Sunday afternoons. But because they believe that what the leadership tells them, that they are working for their own good now, not for Mr. Jones, they are eager to take on the extra labor. Boxer in particular commits himself to Animal Farm, doing the work of 3 horses, but never complaining. Even though the farm possesses all of the necessary materials to build the windmill, the project presents a number of difficulties. The animals struggle over how to break the available stone into manageable sizes for building without picks and crowbars, which they are unable to use. They finally solve the problem by learning to raise and then drop big stones into the quarry, smashing them into usable chunks. By late summer, the animals have enough broken stone to begin construction. Although their work is strenuous, the animals suffer no more than they had under Mr. Jones. They have enough to eat and can maintain the farm grounds easily now that humans no longer come to cart off and sell the fruits of their labor. But the farm still needs a number of items that it cannot produce on its own, such as iron, nails, and paraffin oil. As existing supplies of these atoms begin to run low, Napoleon announces that he has hired a human solicitor, Mr. Whymper, to assist him in conducting trade on behalf of Animal Farm. The other animals are taken aback by the idea of engaging in trade with humans, but Squealer explains that the founding principles of Animal Farm never included by prohibition against trade and the use of money. He adds that if the animals think that they recall any such law, they have simply fallen victim to lies fabricated by the traitor Snowball. Mr. Whymper begins paying a visit to the farm every Monday, and Napoleon places orders with him for various supplies. The pigs begin living in the farmhouse, and rumor has it that they even sleep in beds, a violation of one of the 7 commandments. But when Clover asks Muriel to, to read her the appropriate commandment, the two find that it now reads, "No animal shall sleep in bed with sheets." Squealer explains that Clover must have simply forgotten the last 2 words. All animals sleep in beds, he says, a pile of straw in a bed after all. Sheets, however, as a human invention, constitute the true source of evil. He then shames the other animals into agreeing that the pigs need comfortable repose in order to think clearly and serve the greater good of the farm. Around this time, a fearsome storm descends on Animal Farm, knocking down roof tiles, an elm tree, and even the flagstaff. When the animals go into the fields, they find, to their horror, that the windmill on which they have worked so hard has been toppled. Napoleon announces in appalled tones that the windmill has been sabotaged by Snowball, who he says will do anything to destroy Animal Farm. Napoleon passes a death sentence on Snowball, offering a bushel of apples to the traitor's killer. He then gives a passionate speech in which he convinces the animals that they must rebuild the windmill despite the backbreaking toil involved. Long live the windmill, he cries. Long live Animal Farm. Now we'll see the analysis of chapter 6. Part of the greater importance of the novella owes to its treatment of Animal Farm not as an isolated entity but as part of a network of farms, an analog to the international political arena. Orwell thus comments on Soviet Russia and the global circumstances in which it arose. But the tactics that we see the pigs utilizing here, the overworking of the laboring class, the justification of luxuries indulged in by the ruling class, the spreading of propaganda to cover up government failure or ineffectiveness, evoke strategies implemented not only by communist Russia but also by governments throughout the world needing to oppress their people in order to consolidate their power. Napoleon makes the outrageous claim that Snowball was responsible for the windmill's destruction in order to shift the blame from his own shoulders. Governments throughout the world have long bolstered their standing among the populace by alluding to the horrors of an invisible, conspiratorial enemy compared to which their own misdeeds or deficiencies seem acceptable. Stalin used this tactic in Russia by evoking a demonized notion of Trotsky, but the strategy has enjoyed popularity among many other administrations. Indeed, during much of the 20th century, it was the communists who served as a convenient demon to governments in the West. Both German and American governments used the threat of communism to excuse or cover up their own aggressive behaviors. More broadly, the windmill represents the pig's continued manipulation of the common animals. They not only force the animals to break their backs to construct the windmill by threatening to withhold food, they also use the windmill's collapse, the blame for which, though it is caused by a storm, rests with the pigs for not having the foresight to build thicker walls to play on the animals' general fear of being re enslaved. By deflecting the blame from themselves onto Snowball, they prevent the common animals from realizing how greatly the pigs are exploiting them and harness the animals' energy toward this defeating this enemy. In this chapter, Orwell also comments on the cyclical nature of tyranny. As the pigs gain power, they become increasingly corrupt. Soon they embody the very inequality that Animal Farm was created to overturn. As many political observers have noted, Stalin and his officials quickly entered into the descendant lifestyles that had characterized the Tsars. The communists themselves had pointed to these lifestyles in maligning the old administration. Orwell parodies this phenomena by sketching his pigs increasingly along the lines of grotesque, very grotesque human beings. Throughout the novel, the pigs increasingly resemble humans, eventually flouting altogether old major strictures against adopting human characteristics. With the pigs move into the farmhouse to sleep in the farmer's bed, Orwell remarks upon the way that supreme power corrupts all who possesses it, transforming all dictators into ruthless, self-serving, and power-hungry entities that can subsist only by oppressing others. This is the analysis of chapter 6. Now I will go through the summary of chapter 7 of Animal Farm. In the bitter cold of winter, the animals struggle to build the windmill. In January, they fall short of food, a fact that they work to conceal from the human farmers around them, lest animals' farm be perceived to be failing. The humans refuse to believe that Snowball caused the destruction of the windmill, saying that the windmill's walls simply weren't thick enough. The animals deem this explanation false, but they nevertheless decide to build the walls twice as thick this time. Squealer gives ennobling speeches on the glory of sacrifice, but the other animals acquire their real inspiration from the example of Boxer, who works harder than ever. In order to feed the animals, Napoleon contracts to sell 400 eggs a week. The other animals react with shock. One of the old major's original complaints about humans focused on the cruelty of egg selling, or so they remember. The hens rebel. The Napoleon responds by cutting their rations entirely. Nine hens die. Nine hens die before the others give in to Napoleon's demands. Soon afterward, the animals hear, to their extreme dismay, that Snowball has been visiting the farm at night in secret and sabotaging the animals' efforts. Napoleon says that he can detect Snowball's presence everywhere, and whenever something appears to go wrong by chance, Snowball receives the blame. One day, Squealer announces that Snowball has sold himself to Mr. Frederick's farm, Pinchfield, and that the treacherous pig has been in league with Mr. Jones from the start. He recalls Snowball's attempts at the Battle of the Cowshed to have the animals defeated. The animals hear these words in stupefied astonishment. They remember Snowball's heroism and recall that he received a medal. Boxer, in particular, is completely baffled. But Napoleon and Squealer convince the others that Snowball's apparent bravery simply constituted part of his treacherous plot. They also work to convince the animals of Napoleon's superior bravery during the battle. So vividly does Squealer describe Napoleon's alleged heroic actions that the animals are almost able to remember them. 4 days later, Napoleon convenes all of the animals in the yard with his 9 huge dogs ringed about him and growling. He stages an inquisition and a purge. He forces certain animals to confess to their participation in a conspiracy with Snowball and then has the dogs tear out these supposed traitors' throats. The dogs, apparently without orders, even attack Boxer, who effortlessly knocks them away with his huge hooves. But four pigs and numerous other animals meet their deaths, including the hens who rebelled at the proposal to sell their eggs. The terrible bloodshed leaves the animals deeply shaken and confused. After Napoleon leaves, Boxer says that he would never have believed that such a thing could happen on Animal Farm. He adds that the tragedy must owe to some fault in the animals themselves. Thus, he commits to working even harder. Clover looks out over the farm, wondering how such a glorious rebellion as theirs could have come to its current state. Some of the animals begin to sing Beasts of England, but Squealer appears and explains that Beasts of England may no longer be sung. It applied only to the rebellion. He says, and now there is no more need for rebellion. Squealer gives the animals a replacement song written by Minimus, the poet pig. The new song expresses profound patriotism and glorifies Animal Farm, but it does not inspire the animals as Beast of England once did. This is the summary of chapter 8, chapter 7. Now I'll have the analysis of chapter 7. The humans react with relief when the windmill topples because its failure seems to justify their contempt for the animals and their belief in their own superiority. Similarly, Soviet Russia's struggle against a largely justified reputation for industrial incompetence, famine, and poor management. Stalin's wanted 5 year plans for agriculture resulted in the starvation of millions of people, and industrial production lagged far behind the capitalist West. But the Soviets were determined to mask their problems and keep them from the eyes of the rest of the world. Correspondingly, the pigs of Animal Farm devised elaborate schemes to keep the human farmers from learning about their difficulties. The windmill becomes an important measure of farm's competence, and its collapse deals a major blow to the pig's prestige as equals in the community of farms. Just as Soviet Russia's industrial setbacks threatened its position as an equal to the leading nations of the world and as a viable model of communist revolution. Chapter 7 joins Chapter 6 in focusing primarily on the violent tactics employed by oppressive governments, again explored through the behavior of the pigs to maintain the docility and obedience of the populace, even as their economic and political systems falter and grow corrupt. In Soviet Russia, these tactics led to a massive class division in a supposedly egalitarian society. Orwell suggests that as long as a leadership claims a monopoly on logic, it will be able to justify its monopoly on resources, while the common people suffer and grow hungry. Similarly, as life on Animal Farm grows leaner and leaner for most of the animals, the pigs live in increasing luxury. Napoleon's transformation of the exiled snowball into a into a despicable enemy to all who care about the good of Animal Farm mirrors Stalin's abuse of the exiled Trotsky. Those animals who show even a glimmering of disapproval toward Napoleon, such as the hens who oppose the selling of their eggs, meet a swift death. Similarly, after forcing Trotsky's exile from Russia, Stalin continued to claim the existence of Trotskyist plots throughout Soviet society. During the 1930s, he staged a number of infamous purges, show trials during which Stalin and his allies essentially forced government members and citizens to confess their complicity with Trotskyist or other anti Stalinist conspiracies. In many cases, the purge victims would admit to activities in which they had never engaged simply to put a stop to their torture. But after confessing, the alleged conspirators were executed as enemies of the people. Stalin used his purges to eliminate any descendant elements in his government, provide his people with a common enemy to despise, and keep both the populace and his staff in a state of fear for their own safety, making them far less likely to disobey orders or challenge his rule in any way. Just as the pigs rewrite history, they manipulate statistics in their favor, claiming that every important aspect of life on the farm has improved statistically since the rebellion. Animals live longer, eat more, have more, have more offspring, work fewer hours, and so forth. In this way, the pigs produce a false vision of reality. Then, by ensuring that this reality is the only one to which the other animals have access, and by establishing an effective death penalty for any animal who questions it, they render their dictatorship indestructible. Fear makes the animals inclined to believe the pig's propaganda, and by allowing themselves to believe in the comforting lies, the animals find what may be their only safe haven from violence and terror. This is the analysis of chapter 7. In the next lecture, we will have the summary of chapter 8. Thank you.